She felt the air leave her lungs before the pain even reached her. Sharp kick to the ribs, hard enough to steal her breath and blur the world for a moment. The men around her didn't stop. They kept pushing, shouting, laughing like it was a game. But she wasn't a girl in a crowd. She was a Navy SEAL trained, hardened, and in the middle of a moment that would decide everything. She swallowed the burning agony and stood anyway because falling wasn't an option. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. The street was a narrow throat between two buildings, where the sunlight barely reached the ground. Dust drifted in the air like slow snow, catching the light and turning every breath into a visible struggle. The crowd around her wasn't just watching, they were waiting, hungry for a spectacle. They didn't know who she was. They didn't care. To them, she was just another target, another body to break for fun. But she wasn't there for fun. She was there to bring someone home. Her name was Elena. Not the name she was born with, not the name her friends used, but the name she wore like armor now. She had learned long ago that identities were luxury in her world. In the SEALs, you became what you had to be. You became invisible. You became a shadow. You became the weapon. Her ribs burned with every breath. She could feel the bruising spreading like ink. The pain was sharp, constant, relentless. Yet beneath it was something worse, the fear that she might not be able to finish what she'd come to do. She had trained for years, endured the worst the ocean could throw at her, survived the kind of cold that made men whisper prayers. But this was different. This was human cruelty. This was a room full of people who thought pain was entertainment. A child's voice echoed from the edge of the crowd. Is she going to die? That question hit her harder than the kick. Not because she doubted her own survival, but because she realized how many people were watching her like she was a story, like she was a lesson, like her life was something to be judged. She looked toward the alley where the hostage was supposed to be. The man they'd taken, someone she didn't know, but whose life had become her responsibility. She could picture him, trembling, waiting, hoping that someone would come, that someone would show up and be more than a rumor. Elena's mind flashed back to the night she joined the SEALs. She'd been told there were no heroes, only survivors. That the world didn't owe anyone mercy. That strength was the only language that mattered. She had believed it then. She wasn't sure she believed it now, because in that crowd she could see faces. Faces that weren't born cruel. Faces that had been taught to laugh at pain. Faces that had been told they were powerless, and so they made power out of cruelty. And that was the moment she realized power without compassion was just a mask for fear. The men shoved her forward again. Her boots hit the ground in a rhythm like a heartbeat. Elena could feel the crowd's breath against her back. She had one choice. She could break, or she could become what they feared. She forced her body to move. Every step was a test. Every breath was a battle. The pain in her ribs was a constant drum. Her hands shook not from fear, but from the effort to keep her composure. Then she saw him, the hostage. His eyes were wide, fixed on her like she was a ghost. His hands were tied, his shirt torn. He was so young, and yet he had the hollow look of someone who had already lost something he couldn't name. His gaze met hers, and in that instant something in her changed. It wasn't rage, it wasn't vengeance. It was a promise. She wasn't there to punish them. She was there to take him away. The crowd's noise rose like a wave. Someone shouted, "Kill her!" Another laughed. The air became thick with anticipation. Elena knew she had to act before the crowd decided to make the moment permanent. She moved with the quiet precision of a trained warrior. Her body flowed through the space like water. The men lunged at her, and she dodged, twisted, and struck with controlled force. Each movement was calculated, like she was writing a sentence with her body. Her ribs screamed, but her mind was clear. She could feel the world slowing down, as if time itself was giving her a chance. She grabbed the hostage's wrist and snapped the binding with a swift twist. He stumbled, dazed but alive. And then the crowd surged forward, trying to cut them off. That was when Elena saw the real danger, not the men who kicked her, not the crowd. The danger was the moral choice she had to make. Fight her way through and risk innocent people getting hurt, or surrender the hostage and let the cruelty win. For a moment she hesitated. It was the first time in her life she'd felt the weight of a decision that wasn't tactical, but moral. The crowd pressed in, a living wall. The air was thick with sweat and dust. Elena's mind raced. She could hear the child's question again, as if it were a whisper in her ear. Is she going to die? Then she made her choice. She lifted the hostage onto her back, like a soldier carrying a fallen brother. She didn't run. She didn't charge. She moved with purpose, using the crowd's momentum against them, sliding through gaps, ducking under outstretched arms, refusing to be trapped. The men who had kicked her tried to stop her again, but their strikes were sloppy now. Their laughter had turned to panic. They had never expected her to keep going. They had never expected her to be stronger than their cruelty. And in that moment the crowd changed. A hush fell. Not because they respected her, but because they realized she was not just a victim. She was a force. She was proof that the world still had people who fought for what was right. When Elena finally burst out of the alley and into the open street, the sky felt like a mercy. The hostage gasped for air, tears streaming down his face. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His relief was too loud. Elena's ribs throbbed, but she stood tall. She looked at the crowd one last time. The same faces were there, but now they were different. Not all of them, not even most, but enough to show her that compassion could be contagious. A woman in the crowd whispered, "She's a hero." Elena didn't correct her. She didn't need to, because the truth was bigger than any title. She had come for one person, and she had reminded a crowd of something they had forgotten. That courage isn't born from power. It's born from the choice to protect the powerless. Because strength isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision to keep going anyway. Because true bravery doesn't show off, it shows up. And in that dusty street, under the harsh sunlight, Elena proved that even when the world tries to break you, the human spirit can still rise. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage is real. And Dawn? Forget to subscribe for more stories that restore your faith in the strength of the human heart.